The world felt like it was holding its breath the night I told Caleb I was gay. My heart pounded so loud I swore he could hear it, but his grin didn't falter, just widened, like I'd handed him a secret he was proud to carry. Then his dad, John, walked in, and everything I thought I knew about courage and love unraveled in ways I never saw coming. Elliot Grayson had spent most of his 22 years blending into the background of Willow Creek, a sleepy Ohio town where everyone knew your name, but not your heart. He was the kid with the sketchbook, always scribbling dreams too big for the picket fences around him. Caleb Harper, his best friend since they were 6, was the opposite, golden-haired, quarterback confident, the guy who could charm a room without trying. They'd been inseparable, from building forts in the woods to sneaking beers by the creek. But there was one truth Elliot had kept locked away. He was in love with Caleb. Not just a crush, but the kind of love that made his chest ache every time Caleb laughed or slung an arm around him. Coming out to Caleb that evening in their senior year of college, sitting on the worn couch in Caleb's basement, was the scariest thing Elliot had ever done. "Dude, you're still you," Caleb had said, his voice warm, his hand clapping Elliot's shoulder. Nothing changes that. The relief was like oxygen after holding his breath underwater, but it was fleeting, because John Harper, Caleb's dad, had overheard from the doorway. John, 45, broad-shouldered and weathered from years coaching Little League and fixing cars, was the kind of man who seemed carved from the town itself. Steady, traditional, unyielding. His silence as he stood there, arms crossed, made Elliot's stomach twist. He braced for judgment, for the rejection he'd always feared. But John just nodded, his hazel eyes unreadable, and said, "Dinner's ready, boys." That was it, or so Elliot thought. The next day, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that John was watching him differently. It wasn't hostility, not exactly, but something heavier, curiosity, maybe, or something Elliot couldn't name. He tried to focus on his summer job at the local bookstore, shelving novels while daydreaming about moving to Chicago, where he could be himself without whispering. But Willow Creek had a way of pulling you back, and Caleb was the biggest tether. They planned to spend the summer together before grad school applications loomed, but now every moment with Caleb felt charged, like a storm was brewing just out of sight. That evening, Caleb dragged Elliot to the annual town fair, a kaleidoscope of fairy lights, fried dough, and laughter. The air smelled of cotton candy and possibility, but Elliot's nerves were raw. Caleb, oblivious, tossed a baseball at a carnival game. Winning a stuffed bear, he promptly handed to a giggling kid nearby. "You're too good, man," Elliot teased, trying to keep things light. Caleb laughed, nudging him. "Gotta keep up my rep before we leave this place." The word leave stung. Elliot hadn't told Caleb he wasn't sure he could afford grad school, let alone a new life in a big city. The weight of that secret pressed harder as the night wore on. Then John appeared, weaving through the crowd with a soda in hand, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. He stopped by their booth, his presence grounding yet unsettling. "You boys having fun?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. Elliot nodded, avoiding his gaze, but John's eyes lingered. "Elliot, you got a minute?" he said suddenly, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the fair. Caleb raised an eyebrow, but didn't follow, distracted by a friend calling him over. Elliot's pulse raced as he followed John, the fair's noise fading behind them. They stopped near a bench under a string of fairy lights, the glow casting shadows across John's face. "I heard what you said last night," John began, his voice low, deliberate. "About who you are." Elliot froze, his throat tight. Here it comes, he thought. The lecture, the disapproval. But John's next words shattered every expectation. "I was proud of you. Takes guts to be honest like that." Elliot blinked, stunned, waiting for the catch. There wasn't one. Instead, John reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn book, a journal, its leather cover cracked with age. "This was mine when I was your age," John said, handing it to him. "Read it when you're ready. Might help you figure out what's next." Elliot took the journal, his fingers trembling. He didn't know what to say, didn't understand why John, of all people, was offering him this piece of himself. The moment felt too big, too fragile, like a thread connecting them that neither could name. "Thanks," Elliot managed, his voice barely above a whisper. John just nodded, his expression soft but guarded, and walked back into the crowd. That night, alone in his room, Elliot opened the journal. The first page was dated 1995, in John's younger, Messier handwriting. "I don't know who I am anymore," it read, "but I know I'm not who they want me to be." Elliot's breath caught. He flipped through pages of confessions, doubts, and dreams John had buried long ago, words that hinted at a man who'd once questioned everything, including his own heart. Elliot's world tilted. John Harper wasn't just Caleb's dad, the stoic coach, the straight man who fit Willow Creek like a glove. He was something more, something hidden, and that journal was the first crack in the life Elliot thought he understood. The journal burned a hole in Elliot's backpack for days, its weight heavier than its pages. He couldn't bring himself to read more, not yet, but its existence gnawed at him, a secret share between him and a man he barely knew beyond Coach Harper. Every time he saw John, at the diner, at Caleb's house, even just driving past in his old pickup, Elliot felt a pull, like John's hazel eyes held answers he wasn't ready to face. Caleb, blissfully unaware, kept their summer plans rolling. They biked to the lake, swam until their fingers pruned, and talked about everything except the future. Caleb dreamed of law school, of suits and city skylines, while Elliot deflected, his own dreams tangled in fear and finances. "You're coming with me, right?" Caleb asked one afternoon, tossing a pebble into the water. Elliot forced a smile, nodding, but the lie tasted bitter. He hadn't told Caleb about the rejection letters piling up from scholarships, or how his mom's overtime at the factory barely covered rent. Leaving Willow Creek felt like a fantasy for someone else. John's journal, though, was a different kind of escape. Late at night, Elliot read more, each entry peeling back layers of a man he'd underestimated. John wrote about his 20s, about a friend named Mark who'd made him question things he couldn't say aloud in 1990s Ohio. Mark laughed like the world couldn't touch him. One entry read, "I wanted to be that free, but I was too scared." The words hit Elliot like a punch. John had loved someone, maybe not the way Elliot loved Caleb, but close enough to make his heart race. Had John been in love? Had he hidden it to fit the life he was supposed to live? The questions kept Elliot awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what John meant by giving him this. One humid evening, Caleb invited Elliot over for a barbecue. The Harper backyard was a slice of Americana. Checkered tablecloths, burgers sizzling, neighbors laughing. John manned the grill, his sleeves rolled up, a rare smile softening his features. Elliot couldn't stop watching him, the journal's words echoing in his mind. When John caught his eye, there was a flicker of something, recognition, maybe or a challenge. "Need help with the plates, Elliot?" John called, his voice casual but pointed. Elliot nodded, following him into the kitchen, the air thick with unspoken tension. Inside, away from the crowd, John handed him a stack of plates, but didn't let go right away. "You read it?" he asked, his voice low. Elliot's mouth went dry. He nodded, unable to lie. John's jaw tightened, but his eyes were soft. "I didn't give it to you to scare you," he said. "I gave it to you because you're braver than I was." Elliot's heart stuttered. "I'm not brave," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I'm terrified." John's hand lingered on the plates, his calloused fingers brushing Elliot's. "You told Caleb the truth," he said. "That's more than I ever did." The moment broke when Caleb burst in, oblivious, grabbing a soda. "You two plotting something?" he teased, slinging an arm around Elliot. John stepped back, the spell broken, but Elliot felt the weight of his words like a lifeline. For the first time, he saw John not as Caleb's dad, but as a man who'd fought his own battles and lost. It made Elliot want to be stronger, to prove something to John, to himself. The rest of the barbecue blurred by, but Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He caught John watching him again, not with judgment, but with a quiet intensity that made his skin prickle. Later, as he biked home, the journal in his backpack felt alive, its secrets whispering. He didn't know what John expected him to do with it, but he knew one thing. He couldn't keep hiding. Not from Caleb, not from himself, and maybe not even from John. Summer in Willow Creek started to feel like a countdown. Every laugh with Caleb, every quiet moment with John's journal, pushed Elliot closer to a truth he wasn't ready to face. He couldn't stay here forever, but leaving meant risking everything. The journal became his refuge, a map of John's regrets that somehow guided Elliot's hopes. One entry, dated 1998, stopped him cold. "I married Sarah because it was the right thing," John wrote. "But every time I see Mark's name in the paper, I wonder what I gave up." Sarah, Caleb's mom, had died when Caleb was 10, leaving John to raise him alone. Elliot had always seen John as unbreakable, but the journal revealed a man haunted by choices. It made Elliot question his own. What was he giving up by staying silent about his feelings for Caleb or his dreams of a bigger life? He started noticing John more, not just at Caleb's house, but around town. John volunteered at the community center, fixed neighbors' cars for free, and always had a kind word for everyone. But there was a sadness in his eyes, a shadow Elliot hadn't seen before the journal. One afternoon, while helping John clean out the garage, Elliot found himself alone with him again. Caleb was out with friends, leaving the two of them surrounded by dusty boxes and old tools. The air smelled of oil and memories. "You're quiet today," John said, wiping his hands on a rag. Elliot shrugged, moving a box of Christmas lights. "Just thinking." John raised an eyebrow, leaning against the workbench. "About the journal?" Elliot's cheeks burned. He nodded, unable to meet John's gaze. "It's a lot," he said finally. "You were so honest in it." John chuckled, but it was hollow. "Not honest enough," he said. "I wrote a lot, but I never acted on it. Don't make my mistake, Elliot." The words landed like a challenge. Elliot wanted to ask what John meant. Don't hide who he was? Don't hide his love for Caleb? But before he could, John handed him an old photo from one of the boxes. It was John, younger, laughing with a man who had to be Mark. They were at a lake, arms around each other, their smiles unguarded. "He was my best friend," John said softly. "More than that for a while. But I let him go." Elliot's throat tightened. He wanted to ask more, but John's expression closed off, and he turned back to the boxes. That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. He kept seeing John's face, the photo, the journal's words. He thought of Caleb, too. How easy it was to love him, how impossible it felt to say it. The next day, he found Caleb at the diner, flipping through grad school brochures. "You're awfully serious," Caleb teased, stealing one of Elliot's fries. "What's up?" Elliot's heart pounded. This was it, the moment to be brave, like John said. But the words stuck. "Just stressed about money," he said instead, hating himself for chickening out. Caleb's face softened. "We'll figure it out, man. Together." The promise was so earnest it hurt. Later, Elliot ran into John at the community center, where he was setting up for a youth event. "You okay, kid?" John asked, stacking chairs. Elliot hesitated, then blurted, "Why did you give me the journal?" John paused, his hand still. "Because you remind me of me," he said. "And I don't want you to wake up at 45 wondering what could have been." The words were a gift and a warning, and they followed Elliot home, where he wrote his own journal entry for the first time. "I'm scared, but I want to be brave. For Caleb. For me." The summer heat was relentless, but the real pressure was inside Elliot, building like a storm. He carried John's journal everywhere now, its pages a mirror to his own fears. He wanted to tell Caleb everything, his love, his dreams, his doubts. But every time he tried, the words dissolved, leaving him with nothing but a racing heart. Caleb noticed something was off. "You're acting weird, man," he said one evening as they sat on the roof of Caleb's house, a spot they claimed since high school. The stars were bright, the air thick with cicadas. Elliot wanted to spill it all, but instead he said, "Just nervous about the future." Caleb bumped his shoulder. "We got this. You and me, like always." The words were a lifeline, but they also stung. Like always meant friendship, not the love Elliot craved. John, meanwhile, became an unexpected anchor. They started talking more, small moments, like when Elliot helped him fix a neighbor's fence or sort donations at the community center. Each conversation felt like a step towards something bigger, though Elliot couldn't name it. One day, while they were painting a shed, John asked, "You ever think about what you really want?" Elliot paused, paintbrush dripping. "All the time," he said. "But wanting's easy. Doing's hard." John nodded, his eyes distant. "Hardest thing I ever did was let Mark go," he said. "Easier to fit in than to fight for what you love." The words hit Elliot hard. He spent that night rereading the journal, reaching an entry where John described Mark leaving for Chicago, chasing a life John couldn't follow. "I told him I was happy for him," John wrote. "But I wasn't. I was a coward." Elliot's chest ached. He didn't want to be a coward, but telling Caleb he loved him felt like jumping off a cliff with no guarantee of landing. The next day, Caleb dragged him to a bonfire party at the lake. The crowd was loud, the fire crackling, but Elliot felt detached, watching Caleb charm everyone with his easy laugh. John was there, too, helping set up tables, his presence steady but distant. When their eyes met, John gave a small nod, like he knew what Elliot was wrestling with. It was enough to push Elliot to act. He pulled Caleb aside, away from the fire's glow, his heart hammering. "I need to tell you something," he started, his voice shaking. Caleb's brow furrowed, but he waited. Elliot took a breath, ready to confess, when a drunk friend stumbled over, interrupting. The moment slipped away, and Elliot cursed himself for hesitating. Later, John found him by the water's edge alone. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside him. Elliot shook his head. "I tried to tell him. Couldn't do it." John was quiet for a moment, then said, "You'll get there, but you've got to decide what's worth the risk." He reached over, squeezing Elliot's shoulder, his touch warm and grounding. It was the kind of gesture that felt like more than it was, and it left Elliot reeling. That night, Elliot wrote in his own journal, "John believes in me. I don't know why, but it makes me want to believe in myself." The thought carried him through the next day, when Caleb announced he'd gotten into a law school in Chicago. "You're coming, right?" Caleb asked, his eyes hopeful. Elliot's smile was weak. "Yeah," he lied, the weight of his unspoken love heavier than ever. August arrived, and Willow Creek felt smaller, like the town was closing in on Elliot. Caleb's excitement about Chicago was a constant reminder of the gap between them. Geographic, emotional, everything. The journal was Elliot's only solace, its pages a bridge to John's past and a guide for his own future. But the more he read, the more he saw John not just as Caleb's dad, but as a man who'd lived with the same fears Elliot now faced. One evening, Elliot found himself at the Harper house, helping John sort through old photos for a community center display. Caleb was out, leaving them alone in the living room, surrounded by memories. John handed Elliot a picture of himself and Mark, younger and carefree, at a concert. "We thought we'd change the world," John said, his voice tinged with regret. "But life has a way of changing you instead." Elliot traced the photo, his fingers lingering on John's smile. "Do you miss him?" he asked. John's eyes met his, raw and unguarded. "Every day," he said, "but I made my choice. You still have yours." The words stayed with Elliot, fueling his resolve. He couldn't keep hiding. Not from Caleb, not from himself. The next day, he found Caleb at the park shooting hoops. The sun was setting, painting the court gold. Elliot took a deep breath and said, "Caleb, I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Caleb froze, the basketball slipping from his hands. His face was a mix of shock and something softer. Sadness, maybe. Elliot. He started, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. I love you, man, but not like that. You're my brother. The rejection wasn't a surprise, but still cut deep. Elliot nodded, forcing a smile. I know, he said. I just had to say it. Caleb pulled him into a hug, tight and fierce, and for a moment, it was enough. But as Elliot walked home, the weight of his confession mingled with relief. He'd been brave, even if it hurt. John was waiting on his porch when Elliot passed by. You told him, John said, not a question. Elliot nodded, his throat tight. John stood, walking over to him. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice steady. Not many people have that kind of courage. Then, in a move that stunned Elliot, John pulled him into a hug. It was brief but warm, and it felt like a promise of understanding, of support, of something Elliot couldn't yet define. That night, Elliot wrote in his journal, I told Caleb the truth, and it didn't break us. John was right. Being honest is worth it, even when it hurts. The next day, he started looking at scholarships again, determined to find a way to Chicago, not just for Caleb, but for himself. John's belief in him was a spark, and he wasn't going to let it fade. The confession to Caleb changed everything and nothing. Their friendship held, but there was a new distance, a quiet ache in the spaces where words used to flow easily. Elliot threw himself into planning his future, applying for scholarships and jobs in Chicago, fueled by John's words and the journal's raw honesty. But John himself became a puzzle Elliot couldn't solve, a man who'd given him a piece of his past but kept his present guarded. One afternoon, Elliot found John at the community center, fixing a broken stage for the town's talent show. Need a hand? Elliot asked, grabbing a hammer. John smiled, a rare, genuine one. You're always showing up, he said, tossing him a nail. They worked in companionable silence, the rhythm of hammer and wood grounding Elliot's racing thoughts. When they finished, John offered him a soda, and they sat on the stage, the empty auditorium stretching before them. You were different lately, John said, cracking open his can. Stronger. Elliot shrugged, his cheeks warm. You gave me a push, he admitted. The journal, it made me see I can't hide forever. John's gaze softened, but there was something else there, guilt, maybe, or longing. I wish I'd had someone push me, he said. Might have changed things. Elliot wanted to ask about Mark, about what could have been, but John's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. It was Caleb, needing a ride. John stood, but before he left, he said, You're going to be okay, Elliot. More than okay. The words carried Elliot through the next week, as he landed a partial scholarship to a Chicago art school. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. He told Caleb first, expecting excitement, but Caleb's smile was tight. That's awesome, he said, but his voice was off. Later, at the talent show, Caleb was distant, sticking with other friends. Elliot felt the sting but pushed it aside, focusing on the stage where kids performed off-key songs and clumsy dances. John was there, clapping louder than anyone, his pride in the town palpable. After the show, Elliot helped clean up, and John joined him, stacking chairs. Caleb's acting weird, Elliot said, unable to hold it in. John sighed, setting a chair down. He's scared of losing you, he said. Give him time. The simplicity of it struck Elliot. John understood Caleb in a way he couldn't, but he also understood Elliot. As they worked, their hands brushed, and Elliot felt a spark he didn't expect. It wasn't love, not like with Caleb, but it was something, connection, maybe your gratitude. That night, Elliot read the final journal entry. I chose safety over truth. I don't regret Caleb, but I regret the man I didn't become. The words were a call to action. Elliot wrote in his own journal, I'm going to Chicago. Not for Caleb, but for me. John showed me that's enough. Summer ended, and Willow Creek felt like a chapter closing. Elliot's scholarship was confirmed, and he'd found a part-time job in Chicago to cover the rest. Caleb was still his best friend, but the confession had left a scar, one they both pretended not to see. John, though, was the unexpected constant. His quiet support, a lifeline Elliot hadn't known he needed. The night before Elliot left for Chicago, the Harpers threw a small going-away party. The backyard was strung with lights, neighbors laughing, Caleb toasting to new beginnings. Elliot felt torn, excited for the future, but tethered to this town, these people. John found him by the fire pit, away from the crowd. You ready? John asked, handing him a beer. Elliot nodded, but his eyes were on the journal, tucked in his bag. I'm keeping this, he said, holding it up. John's smile was bittersweet. Good. Maybe it'll keep you from making my mistakes. They talked for hours about Chicago, about Mark, about the lives they wanted. John confessed he'd never told anyone about Mark until now, and giving Elliot the journal was his way of letting go. You're braver than I ever was, John said, his voice thick. Elliot shook his head. You're brave for giving me this, he said, tapping the journal. It changed everything. John's eyes glistened, and for a moment, Elliot thought he might cry. Instead, John hugged him, longer this time, like he was passing something on, strength, hope, a piece of himself. The next morning, Caleb drove Elliot to the bus station. They hugged, and Caleb said, "You're going to kill it out there." It wasn't everything Elliot wanted, but it was enough. As the bus pulled away, Elliot opened the journal one last time, finding a new note in John's handwriting. "Be you, Elliot." That's enough. Tears stung his eyes, but they were happy ones. In Chicago, Elliot thrived. He studied art, found a community, and even started dating, each step a tribute to the courage John had sparked. Years later, at Caleb's wedding, Elliot saw John again. They shared a quiet moment, and John said, "You did it, kid." Elliot smiled, handing him a new journal, his own, filled with his Chicago life. "Thanks to you," he said. John took it, his eyes proud, and Elliot knew. John's unexpected gift had changed his life forever, not just by showing him who he could be, but by proving that even the quietest acts of courage could ripple through time.